Oh, almonds, you better have some almonds.
Yeah.
Oh, the chocolate almonds.
Dark chocolate makes it even better for you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it's I went down to the shopping deal down at 19th shopping, whatever it is, down center down there south and Overland Park down there. And they have a Macy's and they just have the neatest shoes. I mean, they were like Tommy Hilfiger and they were red, white, and blue and all this stuff. I took her 3. I took I think these are at 8.5. They didn't have any of them again. So
Just throwing.
I went
things at
down
me.
on my way home, I just thought, well, I'll just drive through that little Prairie Village, because they had a, it's closed. I thought, well, on the way home, I'll stop at Topeka, it's closed.
Right.
So I have no new Tommy Hilfiger shoe.
Okay, guys, ready?
Ready?
Ready. All right, I'm calling this special board meeting to order. This is the board budget retreat, July 12th, 2022, and it is 6 p.m. So first thing I wanted to say is thank you to everybody for agreeing to come tonight and taking, I guess this is our regular board meeting today anyway, so thank you for that and thank you for arranging schedules. The second thank you goes to administration. You guys have worked hard on this, I can tell, so appreciate the hours of work and sweat and worry. It's gonna look great. As we hear their presentation tonight, please don't hesitate to stop and ask questions. Okay? For us, this is our opportunity to discuss what's going on, and that will be reflected in our minutes, of which is important for HLC accreditation, that we have had our hands in the budget process. Okay. So with that, I'm going to turn the show over to Dr. Ruda and Carla. You guys have at it.
All right, thank you. And I would echo, just echo Marilyn's comments here as well. I'd like to acknowledge the work of Carla. I mean, to get to the point of where we have as far as the book and being able to close out fiscal year 22 and lead into fiscal year 23 is no small feat. I'm extremely appreciative of the work and the time that she's put into getting us to where we're at and being able to have some conversations here and there as well. But yeah, I want this to be, want there to be open dialogue, interaction if there are questions. Quite a bit of information we're going to throw at you and hopefully be able to set the stage with where we project fiscal year 2023 to be. What we have been able to take a look at there as far as within really that 3-legged stool of funding. You have the state funding, you have tuition and fees, and then your third leg is that ad valorem, the local side of taxes there as well. So we'll go through and kind of talk through things, but the first part that I think as we're working to set the stage there, I think it's important to be able to tell the story and kind of take a look at where we're at with current year, but also being able to go through some of the information there on the various debt service that we have, so you can see where we're at with debt service, where we're at on the loan amounts, payoff dates, things of that nature. I think this is a good time annually to be able to come and share that information there as far as where the principal on those loans are at. And then from that, really just lead into more of the conversation and discussion on revenue, expenses, and what we project going into this current fiscal year. I would, just as we're talking about this, and I'll bring it up a few other times there tonight, but tonight is not an action night. Tonight is an information night. Really just kind of looking at, again, setting the stage, telling the story of where we project the budget to be. Then next week, July 19th, at the board meeting, there will be when we have the resolution for revenue neutral rate, and we'll get into what that means there a little bit more, Bob, on the revenue neutral rate there as well. But with the changes that happened in statute last year, it really changes timeframes and timelines there on budget. So in August is when we would hold the public hearing on the budget, and then the board does not actually adopt and approve fiscal year 23 budget until the September meeting. So that's kind of the timeline, and like I said, we'll go through that and kind of map that out again as we go through here tonight there as well. So just leading into things, and I'll kind of try to have you follow along and tell you what pages I'm on as we're walking through things. But again, if there's questions, don't hesitate to stop me and ask those questions. We'll keep it informal and keep it high level. So I'll have you turn to page 3 is really the first page that I wanted to talk through on indebtedness. So this is the indebtedness as of June 30, 22. So as you can see, the various listing of the debt schedule, but the field payment on the original athletic field will be, the final payment will be made this year to complete the debt service on this original field loan. So that one, very first one that you see there at the top, will be expiring and go away here this year. And then last year, with the board's action on refinancing of the suites, the college really positioned itself very positively, took advantage of where interest rates were at, and improved and restructured debt payments that had some cost savings. Did not change the timelines on the refinance there for the suites. So the debt service still remained in 2026. So as you go through and take a look at this, and I'm not going to highlight each one of them there, but each one of the loans and the COPs, you can see where the payoff dates are at. You can see the balance remaining, and then highlighted in bold there at the top of each is what the annual payments are for each of the loans there as well. So again, just wanted for informational purposes to be able to put that in front of you so you see where the debt schedule is at there as of the ending of FY22. So from that, I'll have them move into the next page on page 4. And this is, we'll spend a little bit of time just talking through this information as far as expenses and reserves. So the board policy, as it stands, states that the president shall not fail to maintain a cash reserve of 20%. And that's the board policy that we adhere to. So on page 4, at the top, you can go through and see that in the middle of the page, Garden City Community College Board requires a 20% carryover, which would be $4,050,000. Where we actually ended this last fiscal year, right above that, we have reserves of $5,110,434. So it's actually a carryover reserve of 25.24%. And if you remember back to last year and really the last 2 years, there's been conversation about being very, very focused, growing and proactive and growing that reserve amount from a 20%. Last year, we were able to end the year at a 25% reserve. This year, with 25.24%, that would be adding in an additional 264,000 and change into reserve. So, been very cognizant about trying to keep that threshold around the 25%, but obviously meeting the board policy of maintaining at least 20% threshold there then as well. Any questions on that portion?
And I just might clarify that the 20% is based what do we figure 20% up, and it's the current year expenditures. So that fluctuates based on each year's expenditures.
That I did not know. Thank you.
We might should,
Yeah.
well, we could add a little more information, but as I'm looking at this, I'm like, well, what is it 20% of?
So again, I think that point, that's good clarification, but this point speaks to the stability and where we've been able to navigate the college and still leave it in a very positive situation as we head into this next fiscal year.
So does this really mean, or is it just on paper, that we have an extra $1 million that we didn't think we would have? And do we get to spend it?
Well, when we go through the budget forms, your cash carryover, that's where you start when I start working the budget forms. And so, yes, it is real money. And we actually, if you look at the top of the page, we actually back out. So right now, our unencumbered cash, that means our cash that isn't obligated,
Right.
is $9.2 million. Part of $4.3 million of that is the county payment. The reason we back that out is that June payment is really intended for next year's expenses. And so we, so to really get a true picture of where we are, that's why we back that out. So, but to answer your question, yes. However, if we do, yeah, I mean, so like when Ryan and I were visiting, we did look back at last year's budget retreat. What did we say? What was the target for the 4 million or 5 million there? And just to see if we were on target, and we were.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really it's like, well, you can say, but really until you can say we have that. Okay, but then you have to look at what was your spend during the year too.
Because wasn't the plan to try to increase it for a number of years to build that
Right.
base level, and then we can maybe back off of the 25,
Right.
but we felt like that base number needed to be,
Right.
give us a little more cushion.
For sure.
And then the future years additions may not have to be so high once we got it built up.
Right.
And I didn't want to imply that, yeah, we get to spend it now, because I'm happy.
Sure, just clarifying what it means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm. And hopefully, if the market continues, I mean, I know when you're talking about interest rates, it's a two-sided, but we do have $3 million of CDs that will go out for pricing next week. And so for the first time in probably 18 months, we're hoping that we'll have something beyond 0.0.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that would be
We'll
cool.
have something in
Right.
front of that point.
right.
Mhm.
So that gives us the ability, if depending on the market, to earn some money.
Sure.
That's
Okay.
about $3 million that's going to go out for bid next week.
Yeah, so what we do, it's money invested in CDs.
Yeah.
And we stagger them on the terms. And so we will contact all the local banks and let them know what, million for a year, million for 9 months, and then a million for 6 months is usually what we do. And then we just ask them for pricing. And we go.
Are they all local banks?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And then we just go with whoever gives us the best price.
We pay county tax payment, and they pay us as part of the property taxes.
We don't, well, we don't pay,
For our budget.
we don't pay taxes as a college, but
That's the tax payment receipt, it's backed out.
Oh, okay.
that was money that we received in
We
June.
get it in
Yes.
June, but it's not intended until the July
Yeah.
academic year, so
Mhm.
we don't wanna think about that yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry if I confused you.
I hear tax.
It's spending it's spending next month's paycheck early, we're
Yeah.
gonna leave that for.
Usually means money out, not money in.
Yeah, and you talk taxes.
Oh, good conversation. So carrying on that page, so additionally, just going back to board policy. Board policy states, president shall not fail to maintain capital improvement reserves of $250,000. So at the bottom of the page, you can see the capital outlay cash reserves. Garden City Community College will bring forward $947,900. Revenue, what we project to bring in there from ad valorem towards capital outlay would add 555,000. So from that, just the expenditures and what we have planned for expenditures through capital outlay of 350,000, projecting to bring forward next year at the end of FY23, 1.15 million in capital outlay. So again, I think it's important just to kind of reflect where we're at, but also having that conversation on board policy of what that threshold is that has been met.
And remind me again what capital outlay can be spent on.
So it can be spent on buildings, infrastructure, rooftop units, furnishings. Those sort of things.
So we can go ahead and add in the stuff that was taken out of the STEM building budget when we did it, like the audio system.
Mhm.
Things
I mean,
out of this.
We could, but the reason we try to keep the capital outlay from the past is what we've done here is for items that aren't big ticket items but are important. For instance, if hot water tank goes out and we don't feel like we have enough money in the auxiliary fund, we might take that out of capital outlay, but we did the 2021 $4 million financing because money was so inexpensive then. And so we continue to complete those projects. And then that's our money. And so as we complete those projects and they're billed, then I submit for reimbursement from our trust officer in Kansas City. And so then that just comes back to our cash. So.
And so would capital outlay basically be anything that can qualify as an asset, not an expense? on your balance sheet?
Anything
Okay.
that we would depreciate.
Okay.
So you really can't tell me exactly what the 350,000 is going to go to, it just kind of.
Well, it's already
Reserve.
spent. Yeah, I can tell you. Yeah, it's already, I mean, it's money that we have expensed. It's not a projection.
It's a reserve for that stuff that's coming.
No, it's
up.
actually money that we wrote checks for during the year.
All right,
And so I mean, I could pull it up and tell you pretty easily if you
No,
wanna
that's,
know.
no, that's good enough.
But one of the things, so like, we've used it, for, oh, I can't even tell you off the top of my head, but,
That's always the way it goes.
yeah. So, but some of the things that we have, some of the projects that we have going on were partially funded from capital outlay and then partially funded like from COVID money. Just kind of depending on what. So like a lot of some of the furnishings, the classroom furnishings were partially funded from COVID money and partially funded from capital outlay.
Okay.
But I can easily get that detail if you would like it. No.
Other questions on capital outlay?
So again, our policy says that we want to keep 500,000 to
$250,000.
250,000, so we're well above that,
Mhm. Yeah, and so with the current,
a big cushion.
right, with the current capital outlay levy, we can expect around $500,000 a year.
Right.
Next year, depending on the board's direction, we could go up to $750.
Right. This may be something we need to review. I mean, if we have their expenditures and inflation and everything, 250 might be low for us to have in our policy. We may need to actually
That's a good
look at
point.
increasing that.
That's a really good
Because
point.
if it costs us twice as much to buy it a year from now, we need to have twice as much in the bank as we did
Right.
a year ago.
No, I
That's correct.
would agree. And the same thing with the carryover on the general fund. You know, if we're, we've established that we can meet the 25% carryover, then I would, would probably, you might consider that recommendation of increasing that as well.
Have a stretch goal. Yeah, I think the other piece with capital outlay and what we're working towards among the community college sector in the state is to be able to have some state dollars that would be allocated towards capital outlay as well. So currently, each of the community colleges that absorbed technical schools in the past, so Seward, Dodge, Hutch, there's out of the 19 community colleges, there are 9 that absorb technical schools throughout the years. Well, each of those 9 community colleges right now that absorb technical schools now also receive a $500,000 capital outlay specific towards technical programs each year from the state. Well, that's all well and good. And as it was attended back in the 80s when a lot of that was happening, that was a good mindset. When you fast forward to 2022, Garden City Community College is doing more credit hours in technical education than a lot of these schools that are getting this benefit. So, I've started working with our lobbyists, and we started to have some conversations with legislators about the 10 schools that are not receiving this being included in legislation as we go forward. So, one of the things, and nothing's for sure until it's final and signed off on, but there is some support to be able to move in that direction. That is one of our legislative priorities this year with the community colleges, is to be able to have the other 10 schools included within this legislation change. And so that could make some other opportunities available for Garden City if that was to come to fruition as well. So we'll keep you informed and updated as we go forward on that during this next legislative session.
All right, I have one other question, and I don't know if this is the right spot to bring it up. Our policy about the reserves for, uninsured, yeah, I mean, insurance claims that are not covered.
It's like we're reading minds, that was my next bullet.
Thank you. Where does that go?
Oh, that's a good point. So the board policy was changed 2 years ago that says the president shall not fail to maintain reserves for use towards non-covered insurance claims. So with that, it's not an accounted number that we have there, but that was again one of the other reasons why we had conversations about increasing reserves to 25%. Is that allocation could be used towards non-covered claims because we have stretched the goal and what it is that we have available. So it's encompassed within the additional reserves between the 20 to 25% range.
Okay. For future presidents,
Mhm.
do we need to make it a line item? So that it's not forgotten.
I'll yield to Carla on what she.
My hesitation is that, for some lines of coverage, it's pretty simple, it's a flat deductible.
Right.
For property, it's a percentage of the building's value, a minimum of $100,000. And it seems that in the last 4 or 5 years, the deductible, especially on property, continues to fluctuate based on the market. So yes, we certainly could. Defining what that number is would take a little bit of study.
We struggled with that.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think,
It'd be a hard one to, because if you do that number, you wouldn't need insurance. I mean,
well, basically, we're just self-insuring
yeah,
that,
that first.
that amount. But again, on all lines would be very simple to do except for property. And of course, if we have a big property claim, that's gonna be your largest self-insurance. So like I said, yes, but I'm just not, I can't tell you right now what that number would be.
Or if it's even a feasible amount to attain.
I think in the event of a catastrophic loss like that, what would likely happen is the year following that loss, your reserves are just gonna go down, right? Because,
Mhm.
and that's why we have reserves.
Yeah. And then you work to build them back up. I mean,
Let's say what we discussed that, wasn't that because of the liability issues?
Right,
right.
Yeah, that's,
Policies.
right, and now,
We have one.
now that,
That's right.
yeah, and the company that canceled us because of all those liability claims actually offered a quote. However, another company came in less expensive, similar rated company. So, we weren't so bad after all.
yeah, we'd have to be real careful, because if we had to get into that heavy, and then do we screw up the next year's budget by trying to recoup it all at once, or do we allow ourselves a few years to recoup it? I mean, we have to be very, very
Strategic. about it.
careful if we start getting that specific.
And I think the other thing that, but it's just a balancing act. We have a neighboring school up the road, shall remain nameless, that their president likes to brag about how much money they have in reserves and their campus looks like crap. And, and their students, in my opinion, could have better living conditions, could have, but so what's your money, you're not in the for-profit business, so are you, so it's a balancing act of being prepared and taking care of students.
Mhm.
And
And
faculty
facilities.
and facilities,
Yeah.
because, there comes a point where if you don't take care of them, it just costs more.
That's correct.
The taxpayers have invested in this institution, so it's our responsibility to keep it a healthy and viable.
And not an eyesore to our neighbors.
Right, exactly, yeah, so, again, I think it's just, being aware and being, diligent and.
So I think the answer to the question is no.
Well, I'm not gonna say no, because
Yeah.
that's not my personality. I just would say it would just take a little bit of study.
Yeah.
Make sure we know what we're doing.
But I think to
Redefine the policy a bit.
redefine the policy or, kind of back to the original conversation there, I mean, you said 25% as a stretch goal and a reach goal. Well, we've reached and shown that we can maintain. So do we start looking at a 27 or 28% reach goal, and I think those are conversations that we need to have there to be able to build in. I mean, you're in a very turbulent time. You're in a time there where recession and everything, there's a lot of unknowns. So you set a charge and set an internal goal of trying to grow and increase your reserves, which thus affects, and impacts the reserves that we want to have for uncovered claims. I think that's another option to consider there as well.
I'm real uncertain about the future right now. I think we need to really be astute in what we think we're going to be doing, because I don't know, we're going into a recession. I don't want to see us get tied into something that's going to create us a problem, not being able to get out of it.
I mean, just
Mhm.
exactly like Carla was referring, I don't want to get us into this position that we're putting money aside as opposed to taking care of student needs if these conditions happen, so.
Mhm. Balancing it.
Yeah.
And I think that's, part of it, is where we've had foresight to where when, to Carla's point there earlier, when interest rates were at a place where we should look at borrowing in order to take care of deferred maintenance and needs on this campus. Board had the foresight to do that. We were
They're
able to
almost
do
paying
that.
us to borrow money.
Right.
Or they,
Yeah.
things change in a year and a half, but we were, that's
Mhm.
because realistically, there were so many things that needed done on the campus because deferred maintenance wasn't sexy, that was the time to do it. Let's borrow the $4 million, take care and really make an impact.
Mhm.
And then you can use that capital outlay to take care of, painting the soffits, and the, because that's part of what, I just looked it up real quick, Leonard, because I can't stand not knowing the answer, but, so that's been part of, the repair and maintenance of buildings. And so, and those are, that's $30,000, versus $300,000 or $400,000 before it falls apart.
Plus,
Bless you.
yeah.
We're waiting,
All
so
right.
you just go ahead and do what you
Excuse
need to
me.
do there.
Well,
Yeah,
our
sure wouldn't,
infrastructure got to the point that we had to do something, and that should have been done here before.
I agree.
And we were responsive, because you sure would not want to go out there right now in this market at 5-6x% and be doing the borrowing at this stage.
Yeah, we wouldn't, we'd be having to cash flow it.
That's right.
Right.
I think we're wise in having done what we've done. I just am scared of what the future in the next year and a half is going to be, and
Mhm.
I don't see it as a bright future.
Well, I think
We need
it's
to be
a,
astute,
it's certainly a time to be conservative.
Well, and
not afraid, but concerned.
Calculating.
And I
That's
think
what I
building
was
these
saying,
reserves
calculating.
over the last few years will put us in a more comfortable position than we might have been otherwise.
Yeah, and I think as we get further into the budgeting process and what we'll present to you, it was really exciting this year to be able to bring people together, present things that would take the college forward, things that would help their departments, and the exercise truly had outcomes, not just, we'll bring these things forward, but we really need roofs. So you can't have a new scanner that would be more efficient for your operation, or, because if we don't fix the roofs, then we'll have, on and on and on. So anyway, not to jump ahead, but, so it's, it kind of has unintended consequences too. And I think sometime soon, I think we should take a walk through like ACAD at a board meeting and so that you can see or if you're just on campus, see the new classrooms. Not, the classrooms aren't new, but the furnishings are, and it's just puts a pep in your step.
It's refreshing, yeah, it's good to.
Cause
It's
I
good to
walked
look in.
into a classroom for a meeting. I was appalled at what the furnishings in the classroom. I'm like, this is terrible. I mean, we're better than this, is what I said. They're just broken chairs and. Good. Back to the regular scheduled program.
I think, to answer my original question, the monitor for that particular policy, we could explain that. That this is included in the reserves and our, for the next president or the next president who looks back on these and says, oh, okay, I'm gonna shoot for a little bit over 25%, so I can accommodate those.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the next president will be several years down the road.
I realize that, but I
No,
just,
yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think in lieu of changing board policy to change, from a 20% to a 25% threshold,
which,
then you really put yourself into a corner, not being able to explain how are you accounting for the unincurred expenses from insurance claims.
right,
Keeping it at the 20%, you have that latitude to explain where the reserves are coming from.
yeah, that's a good point, that's a good point. And it is part of our the initiatives, so we have the answer to it.
But there's nothing, there is nothing wrong with being able to have internal goals as a board that says internally, we want to look at being able to stretch to 27 to 28. And yeah, that's a goal that we can look at. That's a goal that we have in mind and we know that we want to be striving for, but not neglecting and not being able to address deferred maintenance, student
Right.
needs and that in the meantime.
Not
there
at the
either.
cost of,
Exactly.
If we can put it up to 27% and not impede something else, that's only astute and making care of what we have.
Yeah, that's correct.
But I don't want to see us paint ourselves into a corner somewhere either by saying, you gotta have this, and then we don't, we've got a problem.
That's right.
Well, I feel like if we're in a position that if we have to dip into our reserves, it would be due to a catastrophic situation. I think we budget very realistic. Not every institution does that. There's all different kinds of theories. To me, spend what you budget, but be realistic about what your budget is.
That's right.
And you don't have to spend it all, But in the event that you need to, that's okay, because that's, but, don't, so, I don't know that one's right or what's wrong.
Yeah.
It's just whatever is the preferred style. I prefer to be realistic and say, and hold people accountable. And, because I think that creates ownership.
And I think that's some of it, I mean, to that point there, and I think it's a philosophical standpoint. I mean, we've worked with this institution long enough to see different philosophies and different mindsets, to where once we have budgets set departmentally, we've had a mindset there that if I have 5,000 in my budget, you better spend 5,000, otherwise
You won't get it next
you
year.
won't get it next year. If you only spent 4,000, well, we're gonna decrease it to 4,000 because that's all you spent. Well, that's,
So then you have
That's a-
cabinets of Post-it notes that never will be used, or, extra, you just spend stupid at the
Yeah.
end of the year. I'm like, no, I mean, that's,
I mean, to trust and empower the people, spend what you need, but don't spend frivolously.
right.
But, I think it's a change in the mindset and absolutely empowering people to make decisions they need to with their budget.
Especially after an in-service where we brag about flying or spread,
Mhm. Mhm.
because that's leftover money.
I'm like, I don't remember that. Oh, I wasn't here.
You wasn't
Yeah,
We've got a lot of good things going on. We don't want to jeopardize them.
yeah.
What's that word mean?
Look at it later.
Okay. Google it.
Now, good conversation. Just going on to next two pages. Again, not spending a whole lot of time, but I want you to be able to have this information and be armed with the information there as well. But the next two pages outline each of the various grants that we have at the college here, everything from the federal financial aid as far as work study Pell Grants and student loans, all the way through the HERF and the stimulus monies, the various grants that we have with K-State, State Board of Regents, and then also the federal agencies there as well. So again, it's just making you aware of the various grants that we do have, the amounts that are tied to each of those, but then just making an informational statement there for you to be able to have that as a record as well. Pages 7 and 8, these are charts and really being able to tell the story on where enrollment has been, both from our service area as well as some selected schools within Southwest Kansas that we track there as well. So for the past 6 years, we've been tracking the graduation rates. So you'll see, like in the far right column, graduation 2022, Deerfield had 7 graduates. Of those 7, 2 have currently enrolled as of last Friday with Garden City. So gives you the total number of students that we're tracking that have enrolled, what that percentage of the high school graduation class is at Garden City. And then it's a compilation at the bottom that tells total number of graduates in our service area and the total that have enrolled at Garden City. One point that I would make, just as a trend line, as you're talking about trend lines, and something that we definitely have been tracking for the last 4 or 5 years. If you look at that very bottom line of the totals, and you look all the way back to 2016, there were 727 students that graduated in our service area. And you fast forward to 2022, and we're down to 672. So you can see there's been a fluctuation, a high of 797 to a low of this year, 672. Projections show over the next 4 to 5 years that there will be a steady decline of about 5% in our service area and really statewide. So, you know, again, those are projections that we're tracking. We're not just taking a look at live data that affects this year. We're tracking 4 to 5 years out of where the trends are showing us, and being able to be responsive. We can't just focus on concentrating our service area. That's our bread and butter. But we also need to be looking at where it is we can grow enrollment and other aspects there as well.
The percentage of attended though has been pretty consistent.
36, 37.
I'm glad to see Holcomb making a rebound. 'Cause that was a low.
Yeah, it had fallen off, and there's a few of the schools in our service area that we need to do better at. But anyways,
And even Garden City rebounded a little bit this year.
Mhm.
So that's good.
Yeah.
That says something when your locals are increasing.
Are
in
staying
numbers.
and-
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's why, you know, my observation, and I think that's why we weren't a bit impacted as much as other institutions during COVID. We have that consistent local base.
Yeah, keep in mind, 24% of our overall enrollment comes from dual credit high school students. Quarter of our enrollment comes from students in high school taking dual credit. So that, you know, that's a significant piece that we have to maintain and nurture those relationships and keep building. And then just going forward, again, just some trend data on pages 9 and 10. This is trend data of the community college system as a whole. This gives you a 10-year look back on where enrollment, both head count and full-time equivalency have been for the 19 community colleges in Kansas. So you can see a very sharp decline, around 27%, you know, where there was a high of 131,000 down to this past year, 95,000. We have not realized that same trend line in Garden City, but it, you know, I think just keeps things in perspective of where we're at there on the state standpoint there. So this leads us into where I like to spend the bulk of our time having some conversations on page 11. And so just being able to talk through a summary of revenue and expenses and projecting / recommending budget considerations for FY23. But wanted to walk through this chart and then definitely have some time to have some open dialogue there then as well. But starting with the revenue side, giving you some comparatives of where we project, recommend FY23 budgets set and what that difference between FY22 is. So in tuition and fees, our projection is to be able to have a 2% increase in enrollment. That's where our goals have been set, is to be able to realize and have a 2% increase that we are accounting for, in addition to the $1 increase in tuition that was set back in February. So the change in value and revenue from FY22 to FY23 would be $93,000 in this next year's budget. On the county side, preliminary valuations came in a couple of weeks ago, and preliminary valuation from the county showed approximately a $65 million increase to valuation. The recommendation that we brought forward, and this will be a part of where we talk much more in depth as we go into revenue neutral, we'll be able to have a flat mill rate, levy a flat mill rate. By holding the mill rate, we still realize the revenue that would come from having an increase in valuation of 1.2 million in revenue varying between FY22 and 23. We'll get into much more of that as we go into it there as well, but the action that would be requested as we go into next week's meeting is to be able to approve the exceeding of the revenue neutral rate. If we were to keep the revenue neutral rate and not exceed, then we would be experiencing a flat budget, and definitely talk through what the ultimate implications of having a flat budget would mean revenue wise, but our recommendation is to be able to maintain a flat mill levy, but be able to realize the increase in valuation of the 1.2 that would go towards next year's budget. Just kind of carrying on there then as far as with the remaining line items on the state aid. So there was some considerable progress made in the funding of tiered and non-tiered funding formula this past year. Garden City stands to gain about $214,000 because of that change in the tier funding model. However, with everything that was figured in on state allocations, last year we had maintenance of effort funds that went towards one-time projects. That was not included in this year's budget. So the net gain for this next year from the state would be $34,894. And then we're not accounting for anything miscellaneous. So all told, the net gain difference in revenues would be 1.38 million for next year's budget. So that leads into the expenses and some conversations that I would like to have with the board. Really just kind of telling the tale on where it is that we can take care of people, and the expenses side of how it is that we propose doing that on cost of living. So on the expenses side, we have two scenarios that we've had extensive amount of conversation with here administratively. Two scenarios that we'll present to you. I'm going to be throwing several numbers at you there, so if there's questions or need to repeat these there, please let me know. But as we move into the expenses section there on page 11, the first option, salary and benefits 1. This is in lieu of doing a percentage increase as we've done in the past for cost of living. Initially, we were looking at and working administratively to be able to look at it at least a 3.5% cost of living increase for employees. But as we started having some conversations, we started looking at how it is that we could maybe help employees and help to address and move the needle a little bit more, particularly when you look at the fact that what we're experiencing here in this economy is significant impact wise to families. Everything from daycare increases to travel, gas, inflation around 7%. So really had some very good dialogue and conversation. So salary and benefits 1 recommendation is to be able to put $3,000 towards the base of each eligible employee. So what that means in scenario 1 for a faculty, this would equate to a range of anywhere between 3.5% on the low end to the high end of 7%, with the average raise for a faculty being 4.7%. On the staff side, it's a range of 3.5% to 12.8%, with an average among the staff of 5.2. So this, this scenario, in addition to the proposed $3,000 to base, also would account for an additional $290,000 that would be allocated towards covering health insurance benefits. We received some initial preliminary numbers from Blue Cross Blue Shield, so this will be accounting for an additional $290,000 to help offset health insurance benefits for employees.
That would be a worst case scenario. We're still in negotiations with them, but it wouldn't, so. Do you mind if I?
Not at all. Not at all.
So currently, what we do with employees is we give them a monthly allowance, you might say, of $575 a month. So if what they elect is under that, they don't get the difference. So say they elect the high deductible plan, maybe it's only $383 of premium, so they have nothing out of pocket. And rather than paying $575 for that employee, we only pay the $383 or whatever it is. So with the worst case scenario, our employees that are on that high deductible plan now, it would still be under the $575. So that expense would just be the college expense, not the employee's expense. We're working with a consultant negotiating on our behalf with Blue Cross and Blue Shield, looking at some different options, just due to how insurance does business. But we have had some pretty significant claims this year, so that's how it works. But anyway, we'll know more. Our health insurance doesn't renew until October, but we usually get the bad news early so we can incorporate it in the budget. But so I think it's important that for you to know that we wouldn't, it might cost some employees that are on the low deductible plan, they're, depending if they have family or whatever, their costs might increase some, but for the majority, there wouldn't be an increase.
What is the COVID funding expenses?
Those are things that COVID has paid for the last 2 years that will be brought back into our budget or the general fund. For instance, public safety, nurses, the Trish and that. So as that pot of money runs out,
The free ride's over.
yeah.
Okay.
Rates going up again.
The rate's going up, and we have a budget to account for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and the market increase for facilities, grounds, custodial staff, $174,000 is actually something that we enacted back in April, just to account for really the competitive market that we're seeing on hourly staff. We were losing some staff. This has helped tremendously on the retention side by increasing and moving the hourly rate up. But the $174,000 would be what's the realized net impact for this next budget year with that decision. And then the last piece, and I'll kind of get into this because it'll tell the story on both scenario 1 and 2, is new positions of $250,000. So if you look at these colored pages. So thought that it would be helpful there from several different vantage points to be able to have this conversation with the board, but also to be able to have you understand one, that there is a planning process that happens here on campus. It's not just something that we talk about, it is something that we do. But with that planning process, being able to see what it is that comes from the planning process as far as requests, how that planning process works, and really what the culmination of that planning process entails. So these three pages are the requests that have came forward from starting at the department level back in February, moving into division level. So divisions would be instruction, administrative services, student services, athletics. Moves into the division level. And so throughout the course of the spring semester, and this is not all encompassing of the requests that came forward, this is a pared down version that, as you go to kind of picture it as a funnel. So when we're up here in February at the division level, it's a free for all, and we're looking at everything that we feel like will benefit and is needed, personnel, equipment, supplies wise. As it comes into the division level, then we're starting to narrow and really take a look at what it is that at the division level we want to take forward. And finally, from the division level, it moves into college council, where we're having the final conversations and discussing what are the priorities and what is it that we want to have for consideration as we move into the next budget. So what you have in front of you is what's been pared down and what has been worked through with college council. The 3 pages are the 3 different categories that we have as far as budget requests. So this first page, the green page, is the personnel requests. The blue page is equipment and operational requests that are over 5,000. And then the yellow is any operational supplies that are under 5,000. That was how we delineated and broke down to be able to come up with a way of making some sense of it there at the college council level. So I give this to you there so that you can see, one, what the requests are and what is coming forward, and happy to talk through any of these requests. But the other side of this there is, as we're looking at positions on both scenario 1 and 2, where we indicate new positions of 250,000. As we went through this process with college council, we worked through the scenario that and presented to them that we would have 400,000 that we would work towards allocating towards budget requests and priorities in this next year's budget. So that was the number that we had worked through the budget. So we had a dollar amount that we could look at to start prioritizing. So on the green sheet with personnel, what you can see here in this last column, highlighted in yellow, is what has came forward from college council as being the priorities on personnel that would come forward as far as in FY23, based out of that 400,000 that has been allocated. So out of each of the personnel requests, the ones in yellow are what it is that is transcended and moved through the process and risen to the top there from the college council planning and decision making. And then at the bottom, you can see that it is totals 258,200. So we're at an alignment with 250,000 of new budget requests that we figured in. Similar, on the next pages, and on the blue, this is what's came forward from college council and been pared down as far as top priorities for equipment and operational expenses over 5,000. The yellow column at the far left, or far right, I guess, if you're holding it, is what's been prioritized as the operational expenses to carry forward into this next budget year at 109,000 total. And then the other sheet supplies the same manner. With supplies of a total of 32,000. So again, I think, the premise behind this is one, so you can see the planning process and what it is that comes from it. But also as we're leading into an accreditation visit, you can be able to speak to and have some understanding of what it is that feeds into the budget decision-making process, that there is a planning process that's utilized on campus. You have information to see what it is that comes from that, and how it feeds into budget planning. But be able to also speak to and understand from the board standpoint how planning plays into budget planning and future conversations there as well. So I think the premise of that there is just to be able to have some takeaway and some understanding of processes, because those will be questions that come from the site team, as far as board's understanding and board's knowledge of planning, of budgeting, of forecasting. So you would have this information in front of you there for those discussions. So.
Magruder, so the ones that aren't lined up didn't make the cut, right? Is that correct?
Correct. Mhm.
Also, I gotta understand how this process works. How does like the admissions UVix request go from 4,000 and get 8? And photocopying supplies, that's 3,500 and gets 10? How do those get such a big jump beyond what was even requested?
Cost of paper increased from the time of the start of this budgeting process in February to where it is there now. So the cost of printing and paper and production.
Has more than doubled.
Mhm.
I can speak from when I was here on tech. We would, CJ would put in a proposal, fire, EMS, welding, all the departments put in a request, then we'd have a meeting of all departments. And between all of us, we would decide what was a high priority. Whether we want to get breathing apparatus for the fire training or welders or whatever, then you have to send it on to the council.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, and I think the other piece to explain, and just so you have some understanding of what each of these columns mean, and it doesn't have a whole lot of relevance necessarily from the board standpoint, other than being able to speak to it there, but on the ranking column. So there are 19 individuals that are on college council. So you have 19 varying inputs, varying viewpoints, inputs, thought processes. So what we did is had a Excel sheet that went out, and we asked each of them individually to rate on a scale of 1 to 3, 1 being the highest priority, 3 being the lowest. And then this is the mean average of where everything came in from that ranking. So this gives you, so then we used that information and took it forward to college council so that we could have further conversation here following the individual rankings, and then be able to have more robust discussions as we went forward.
What are the planned purchases or allocations for purchases that directly affect students? That's one of the items that they might ask is, how do we decide what goes for student success versus operations?
Yeah, and that can really be, student success can be told so many different ways. I think, from a personnel standpoint, being able to have an additional person who is out in the admissions arena that is recruiting, but also helping to navigate that transition to college, helps with student success, counseling.
I think all of those top positions directly affect students.
Yeah, the last one
Yeah.
especially,
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I mean, Title IX, custodian and maintenance,
Like you said,
sort of.
the desk in the
But if you're-
classroom versus.
Well, to me,
you don't really think so until you're sitting in the classroom, you don't
You
have
don't have
AC
it,
in the middle of August and then directly, so.
Well, and even custodial to me comes down to safety. If we don't have people there to clean up spills and mops and leaks, we have people falling, we have
That's right.
injuries, so to me, custodial even falls in with safety.
Sure, that's a good way to say it.
Yeah,
I mean,
and I think,
especially all the disinfecting over the last couple of
Right.
years,
Yeah.
it's a safety issue.
as you go into, even like some of the operational, fire signs, student bunker gear, safety.
For sure.
You know, as we get into the transition, the instructional design for new proctoring and video software. This is for our online students to be able to have online video proctoring. So it's the tutoring and student success aspects on that end. You know, so I think you can make a case. I mean, could we stretch? You know, you would be stretching it to say the purchasing power wash system is going to have a benefit to student success. Not every one of these items is.
Right.
But I think you can absolutely look at this and see there are areas that have impact to students and have impact to recruitment, retention, and student success.
Right, right. But part of our responsibility is operations as well as,
Part of our responsibility to be owners too, is to maintain their assets.
right. Good point.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things, like with the increased advertising budget, you know, over the last 3 years, we have really changed the type of advertising that we're doing. And so because what we're focusing on is a lot of digital, we get analytics, and so that helps us say, well, you know, in this amount of time, this amount of action has happened based on what we pushed out in this area. And so, you know, Melody has done a really good job about, you know, we're getting a lot of traction. So perhaps we need to look at investing a little more in that area. You know, we can even get it drilled down to how many times when we change something on our website, is it getting touched, you know, those type of things. So it's pretty, she gets really fired up about it when she is talking about it. And, you know, I know enough to know that it's important. I'm glad that we have somebody that's passionate about it and has a college age student that knows what students are listening to and watching. And, you know, so we have to diversify that, of course, but we don't buy ads in phone books anymore.
There are no photos.
It's been nice seeing Garden City on KSM.
Yeah.
When we have Dodge and
Mhm.
everybody else on there advertising.
Well, like I watch
I just
Kate.
started seeing that.
Yeah, like I watch the channel I watch because I just have an antenna in my bedroom and that's the only station I get is Cake. And so I asked her one time, I'm like, how come we don't advertise on Cake? I don't know. So she reached out to them and they have some really good, affordable packages and stuff. And so, but anyway, you know, it's fun to have new energy in departments and because they, you know, you get different things, but so. And, you know, one of the things that is real important as we're doing that is to have a close relationship with admissions so that it's a cooperative effort, you know.
Grant coordinator in the office ranked a little low, didn't it? I mean, they cut him in half.
The money wise, that's real, because realistically, we wouldn't hire somebody till the first of the year.
Okay,
But when you have over $10 million, being in the institution, we need, it needs to be a centralized process,
right.
in my opinion.
Just reporting with grants is a
Right.
headache in itself.
Right, and so when you have,
So
5
we need to
different
take it off.
departments,
Yes.
and have 5 different understandings, it's a, in my opinion, it's a risk to the institution.
Yeah.
So. Anyway, that's kind of a little bit behind that.
Any of the items that you would like additional information on?
Why don't you go ahead and speak to the apprenticeships?
Yeah, that is as a coordinator of registered apprenticeships is really a direction as we look future-based, where it is that we can grow the college. There is no revenue stream currently that's really coming from apprenticeships at Garden City. However, we have had multiple conversations with area businesses and industry, ranging from school districts to the hospital, Empirical, Tyson, variety, plumbing, contractors. Really, it's a multitude of industries. And the push to move towards apprenticeships is really moving towards non-credit based instruction, being able to take individuals that are employees with these different businesses and industries and meeting what their workforce needs and workforce training are. So just in this past semester, we started working with and actually just received our first approved apprenticeship through the state with Empirical, where we will be training up to 20 new employees. We sat down with Empirical, just to give some context, but we sat down and identified what are the competencies, the skills, what is it they would expect and want from the training that we would provide. Our instructors then took that information and started to build out the courses, started to build out the training that would be entailed, the length of time that it would take in order to meet those competencies and adequately prepare those employees. But with the apprenticeships, the way the apprenticeships work there though is it's not your traditional mode of instruction. So you're not sitting in a classroom for a certain amount of seat time. Your apprenticeships can vary on the amount of time that it takes, but it's really built on the premise that you're supplementing what you're learning in the lab and in the classroom, but then taking it back to your business and applying it to the business there then as well. So these employees that are coming to us for the training are current employees of the businesses being paid their regular wages to come in and receive this training, but then also going back to work to actually enact and implement what it is that they've learned there as well. The side of this there and why we've moved forward in putting a coordinator of registered apprenticeships is because there is a tremendous amount of investment being made both at the state and the federal level towards apprenticeships. So the apprenticeship that we just had approved with Empirical, there's no dollar amount that Garden City Community College is attributing, other than we have a faculty member that's going to be teaching. The state of Kansas, because we are helping to increase skills and increase employee base, the state of Kansas will cover 50% of the training costs, and then the business covers 50% of the training costs. So the individual employee, the student that we're teaching through these apprenticeships isn't paying out of pocket. It's covered through these partnerships with the Department of Commerce and the business. We gain by being able to help put an increased skill set back into the economy there then as well. So with this, we're actually hosting a statewide meeting here at Garden City next week to start working towards the process of setting Garden City Community College up as a registered apprenticeship site. So then we can be able to go into school districts and take paras, transition them to teachers. So it would be a 4-year pipeline that we're taking students being able to transition, but because they're in an apprenticeship, we can take some of the experiences and the work experience that they already have and apply that work experience towards credit. So they're not having to earn 120 hours. They may only have to take 90 hours because we can apply 30 hours of work experience in this apprenticeship model. So, this is really a future base that there is no revenue that's coming to Garden City right now, but we really see that there's a future. And we've had a tremendous amount of needs brought to us there by businesses asking for this apprenticeship model. So this individual person will be the one that's tracking the time and the effort of employees, making sure that the students that are signed up are actually going to class, that they're going back to their work, putting in the hours that need to be registered for apprenticeships. So putting some initial investment into a position that we believe pays benefits in long term.
Next question is, where do we get a house?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. So we've identified a very little cozy spot just right outside of Mark's office. So they will not have a office. They're going to have a desk, and they'll be, this side of the building is not open right now, so you don't have to worry about in and out traffic as much.
So like where Alexis used to work,
Correct.
setting
Yeah,
that
we
back
used
up.
to have that reception.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll just set that back up.
Mhm.
But the instruction actually happens at the work site, right? Or does it happen on campus?
Could happen both. Could happen either way. Like what we're going to be doing with Empirical will be done in our industrial maintenance shop.
Okay, sure.
Some of the work that's being requested by others could be on site at the employer.
So it just kind of depends on what that program is.
Correct.
I mean, it's not really a new instructional program, it's just new ways to
New
use our
ways.
existing instruction.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. And moving away from more of the credit model to a non-credit and work-based experience model.
Very good.
So kind of, diving back in, and wanted to talk through that there. So as we move back into page 11 and the expenses. So again, the two scenarios that we're presenting to the board, scenario one is the $3,000 to the base of each eligible employee. Salary and benefits, scenario two is the same scenario with the exception that it is $2,500 to the base for each eligible employee. So the difference, if you just look at that column, the middle column of the difference, 2,500 to 3,000 is roughly $70,000 difference of the 2,500 to 3,000. As we've gone through and had conversations administratively, our recommendation is to be able to apply the 3,000 to base. And again, just going back to the numbers, you're looking at it on the faculty side, an average of 4.7% cost of living increase, on the staff side, an average of 5.2%. So this model is significantly better for employees than what the initial model was. We were looking at it being a flat 3.5%. The other side of it there is it does help considerably those individuals that are on the lower end of salary pay scales, helps to elevate them, retain them, and bring them along there in a better format as well.
And just, so if you do the high level math, you would know that $70,000 at $500 is only 140 employees, and we have more than that here. So just know that, so when we say eligible, like all of the people, like all of our facility staff that had a pay adjustment during this past year. Anybody that has a pay adjustment or position change, April after isn't eligible. New employees aren't eligible. So that accounts for the difference in about
Because they're
60.
starting or their raise
Right.
at that time already kind of
Right.
checked this into
Yeah, so
account.
there's about 60 employees who wouldn't be eligible. So, just so you. That's not enough money.
Not doing math right. So we'll kind of come back to that conversation, but just to finish on the expenses side with operational then as well. The operational expenses that we've accounted for is with fuel costs, increasing our fuel line item by 100,000 for the increases in travel.
Aren't you optimistic?
Well, we doubled, but our fuel budget is currently $100,000, so we doubled it.
I hope you're right.
Well, Craig's idea was to not go to so many events. But that didn't.
Yeah.
That sucks.
It's about putting students first, eh?
So that didn't fly, so.
What's option B? And then the other factors, the council priorities. So again, the priorities that came from these pretty colored sheets of 200,000. Insurance savings, from last week's meeting with property liability and the insurance savings that we realized, that the net difference from 22 to 23 would be 571,689 operation. So with this, just kind of jumping down to the last line of revenue and expenditures, option 1, revenue and expenditures, option 2. The amount that you see listed in those columns of 18,681 is actually what, if we were to go with option 1, that would be what the difference is between projected revenue to expenses. If we were to go with option 2, the 88,682 is the net difference between revenue to expenditures on that scenario. So.
And you're expecting here before long to know whether that worst case scenario 290 is the number or what it might actually come in at.
Yeah, in fact, we have a conference scheduled for the 25th with a consultant.
So I think, part of the conversation, and definitely want to open it up here for dialogue there as well between the scenarios of 1 and 2. Again, it's not about action tonight, but it is about direction. As we head into the August meeting, being able to know what it is that we can be able to bring back to the board for consideration on the budget at the August meeting. But the other factor and the other impact that this discussion has there as well is on the faculty negotiations. So we have not finalized the negotiated agreement with faculty yet. We've reached tentative agreement on everything with the exception of salary and benefits. So our request is to be able to have some direction from the board there tonight on the option 1 and 2, so that we can go back and finish up the conversations and the negotiations with faculty, and by August be able to have a finalized negotiated agreement that we can bring to the board for review and approval as well.
I feel that the
everything they've gone through with COVID. Teamwork they're putting in on developing these new programs, HAFCs, audit. We gotta keep our report. We said, what we lose 5 employees because of higher paying jobs over in maintenance.
Yeah.
So. And everybody's looking for help, so.
Right.
Do what we can to.
Yeah,
To keep them.
Yeah, and you know, and we use
Mhm.
a lot of the perks that we have here at the college as far as the holidays, spring break, Christmas, all of that, but at the end of the day, you have to pay your bills. And so,
I am a merit-based capitalist employer, so I will always struggle with this more government and educational.
understand.
So forgive me, but I will always
Yeah.
have a harder time just because I come to it with such a different perspective.
You're a for-profit.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So
Mhm.
I wrap my head around something a little different on just
Why do you wanna
everybody
leave?
gets.
It's taken me about 15 years to change that thought process.
Yeah. So you're
And ending the year with 18,000 on a $21 million budget is, that what you want to be? Yeah.
Yeah, production
In
is
our
always what
situation.
determines raises for me, so this is just a hard concept to grasp.
So there's lots of things to consider when we as a board make a decision about the budget and where we're spending it, because first of all, we represent our citizens and community, and we're charged to spend money, wisely and be frugal but smart about what we do. But on the other hand, we have administration and staff who have gone through this process, starting out big, and they come down to, this is what we need, this is what we'd like to do. They are asking for, $400,000 more for these new positions and equipment. And I think that they've done a very strategic process in arriving at these positions and items. So it comes down to a matter of, how do we satisfy both sides of the story?
And we gotta keep the faculty and staff going, or we,
And in the
for
middle,
disservice to our students,
yeah, in
yeah.
the middle is students, right? And that's
Yeah.
our biggest job, is to take care of
Absolutely.
students. So I just wanted to hear what what your feel is for any of those items, or where does it cause you some angst? Are you okay with it?
Well, and my comment was more about even if I, had no problem with the total budget, it'd be like, you get 500 more, you get 4,500 more. That's where I mean,
Because
on
of-
merit-based,
Mhm.
this even Stevens across the board just is weird
Mhm.
for me.
Well, and Shanna, there's the saying that equal isn't fair. And, because, because there are some, it's like every organization, there are, there are faculty members who go above and beyond, don't expect an extra dime, serve on committees. And there are faculty and employees, I'm not picking on faculty,
Sure.
that do what's required.
Yeah.
In their, barely, and so, so it's equal, but is it fair?
Right. So that's where I come from, so. I want to make sure everybody is taken care of.
That's right.
The cooperation I've seen over the last couple of years between faculty, technical versus academics, and staff and administration has been tremendous in the positive way of getting along, working together, and as a team. You still have some, conflicts, but not as much.
How about you guys? What's your feels? What's your thoughts?
I mean, you know, I like the idea of helping those that maybe might be at the bottom of the rung to come up, and it's really not hurting. You know, when you get a 4.7% increase if you're faculty, if I understood it right, and 5.2%. Those are. I remember being here, and the only thing we got was a paper weight. It's our increase. A glass paperweight. I think I've still got it.
Fish?
I think that's what it
That
was.
was a fish.
I thought that was our stupid Christmas present this
Oh.
year.
Fish in a sack.
And it was the president's wife that picked him out. for us.
But so I would be for, you know, going with the first benefit. I feel. You know, you're doing your very best, you're putting your best foot forward to try and, you know, keep good people and just like David was saying, I mean, the people, it's hard to find good people. Anymore. Strength.
And I'm not opposed to the higher amount.
I like, the reason I like the higher amount is because you're in competition out there for employees.
No, they don't need to know that, right?
You're still
They
negotiating,
do,
right?
Still negotiating.
But they do, they do,
They know it.
they know.
And I believe it is, it's become a much better place to work, I think, in my opinion. A lot of it has to do with the administration.
And we want to keep it there.
Yeah.
I somewhat, Carla's statement, fair, equal isn't fair. I've been in business for so long, everybody gets the same thing, and the guys that were really working didn't get it, but those that were just tagging along did. You gotta take care of your people. You gotta take care of them in a fair way. And I've always been an advocate for the people being paid properly, being paid right, being paid fair. And if we've got a system here that we can do that, I'm in favor of it. You know, and when I was in the bank, I had to go through 50 people and raises. Well, you can give them 2% or 1%. Then you go tell them, well, then why? Because that's all they gave me to give you. I can't change it. The boss said that. And they said it from, we're only going to give this much money for raises.
Right. I think the other model that we took into consideration is we were strategic about this here though as well. Kind of back to some of the conversation, you know, a 3.5% raise for somebody making 35,000 versus a 3.5% raise for somebody making 75. That's a big variation.
It's a big difference.
So how do we help lift and move those that are lower on the salary scale and propel them up and do so with equity? You know, I think we felt like this was the right strategic move there for that.
So now you got to put merit in there, and I don't know how you do all that.
Yeah, and that's a longer bridge to walk there.
But we're in such weird times,
Yeah.
it leads to some weird solutions sometimes, and sometimes they're not perfect, but there is, you know.
Right.
As good as the times can allow for, solution wise.
It's a weird situation, just
Mm.
dealing with the real world versus academia.
Yeah.
Go ahead and carry on. I'm going to leave you for a couple of minutes. I'll be right back.
The other thing that I like about the $3,000 to base is we're setting in good faith this amount out to the faculty who are still negotiating their salary. And we're also drawing the line. So we are allowing an increase, but we are drawing a line. And so I think that also sends a message that,
Well, and we don't vote on this officially yet, but I mean,
right,
they know
right,
that
but
we're willing to look at
here's,
this. And
here's where we're gonna go.
Carla has that of a negotiating team that says this is all we can do.
Right.
Period.
And it comes from us.
Yeah.
Correct.
Comes from us. So. Does anybody else need a little break?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, why don't we take 5 minutes? Come back.
They need water. Anything?
Yeah, I tried to throw my bottle at you all, but you weren't here.
She really did.
Yeah, it was funny.
And the lid wasn't on it.
So we got splattered.
Thanks for being here.
Oh, absolutely.
I just needed to stand.
Mm-hmm.
Those, you want them to have to do that. Those- For sure.
I mean, there's salad and fruit in there. Okay.
Here I left, nobody's in here now.
No.
They're all gone. Everybody took off,
We're the life of the party and they left.
evidently.
You left.
Somebody left donuts. They left over from this morning, huh? I don't know how long they've been there. Hopefully this morning. Guys don't get donuts over there in IT. Sometimes somebody brings them in. Yeah. Water in there. Who left the donuts from yesterday? Colin's birthday. Who? Colin's birthday? Yeah. Well, for Colin's birthday, he won't know I ate this.
Colin is my grandson's birthday.
They do that personality value. Yeah, we just have to personality. The supervisor had to lie.
Her dress was really pretty, Marilyn.
It's a Stitch Fix.
Do they go over
Oh, do you order stuff from there?
Yeah, yeah.
Kim in the business
enjoy
office does too. And of course, she's so tall and thin that I think she, has trouble shopping anyway, so.
It's like they get you.
That's awesome, yeah, obviously.
So you can tell them, how often you want them to sauce and what you like, what you don't like. Or you can even pick out stuff, but I just let the stylist pick it out for me and probably for the last one, I only took, they sent me 5 items and I only took 4. But before that, I was taking 3 and 4.
Cool.
Yeah, it's good.
These all empties?
No, I
No,
think they're all
Oh,
full.
they're all full.
You can take them home.
Now, put them in the fridge there.
Happy birthday, Colin.
Get one?
No, I'm not people. Oh, yeah. It's not my birthday.
Happy birthday, Colin.
That's what my
These were Colin's birthday today. Oh, where'd you find that? Out there on the counter.
On the counter. It's Colin's birthday, huh?
Yeah. Somebody else has one coming up here too.
How old was he today?
58.
Huh?
I mean, he has the hair of a 58-year-old. No, 48.
48?
Yeah.
That sounds better.
Yeah.
and that's how old you'll be too.
No,
You'll be 47.
47. Yeah.
So he really is older.
Yeah. Yeah. He denies it, but he is.
The only place he's ever worked, isn't it?
Since he's been back in Garden, he worked down.
Oh,
at-
that's right.
Yeah, he worked down in Topeka after
Yeah. I
he
forgot
finished
that.
his master's, yeah. Yeah. He was a manager's clinic there for a couple of years.
Really?
Mhm. Back up to triple digits tomorrow.
Oh, joy.
It was so nice today.
Sunday after the All-Star game down at the baseball field, my car said 101.
Ugh,
Oh, wow.
I was like, oh.
ugh. Yeah, we're letting the baseball team use our buses here for the next 3 weeks.
They're so excited. Let me tell you, they are over the moon.
Good.
I'm glad
Joy.
something's being done, because man, we were loaning out the Suburban and multiple vehicles and handing them our gas card and
Yeah,
so.
that's what I told Randy. I said, no, I don't have a problem doing that there. I said, you guys, as long as you guys can pay the fuel, I mean, it'll cover cost to drive there and just get them a hotel and food.
Yeah.
I hope Andrew done taking a little, like we talked about, student services, I hope he's doing better with players, so.
Yeah, it was scary for them to be driving by themselves. Anyway. I'll be back in session. Okay. Do you, any other comments about the options that we have before us here? Option number 1 or option number 2? And so we just need to give Ryan our direction on which way we're going.
Pretty well was option 1, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think anything more would be considered a vote, so.
Okay,
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
sounds good.
Dr. Whitman.
Yeah, so mean.
Some of those people. So just continuing, just moving through and that was the primary point of conversation, but next several pages are really just highlighting ad valorem, mill levy, what mill rate is, how it's figured. Again, don't want to spend a whole lot of time going through that, but do want you to have that there for your information on that. And then on 14, page 14 gets into the revenue neutral rate. So this last year was the first year that through the statute changes, we began following this new process with the budget cycle. So with the revenue neutral rate, at next week's board meeting, we will have a resolution that we're gonna condense it. I'll make it short. But by June,
June
No,
15th, they had to provide that to us.
July 20th, we have to have the notice to exceed the revenue neutral rate to the county clerk. So we will have that resolution just giving our notice to exceed the revenue neutral rate. That would be the only action there at that July board meeting, and then in August is when we would start to publish put the public notice out there on the budget hearing. At the August board meeting, then we would have the public hearing, be able to hear the public's notice on that. And then that moves into September when we would actually adopt. So from this conversation tonight, our plan would be to bring forward budget documents in August that reflect the conversation we talked about there with tuition, state and local ad valorem being figured based upon the calculations we presented tonight. And then by October 1st is when we would have to have the budget certified into the county. So page 18 just gives you an outline that goes through Senate Bill 13. Highlights what it is, the board's action by month need to be. And then the following documents, again, are a lot just for informational purposes, but the remaining pages of this budget book, starting on page 19, is just mill rate history for the past 20 years. So you can see where valuation and mills have been. 20 and 21 give you more of a trend line data as far as where valuation and assessed mills have fallen on that same 20-year timeline. And then informational pieces of this there as well, starting on page 22, are the tuition and fee comparisons of Garden City to each of the other 19 community colleges based on each of the tuition codes that we use. So down at the bottom, you can see, like on page 22, this comparison shows in district, which would be our Finney County tuition rate, and where that compares with each of the other 19 in-county tuition rates. Same thing reflected for Kansas, out of state, border state, and international as we go through the next 3 or 4 pages there then as well. So just wanted to give you a tutorial there of where Garden City is in relationship to the other 19 based upon each of the tuition codes. And then the last 2 pages or 3 pages, again, to show where Garden City is at historically in comparison to the other 19 community colleges. as it relates to actual revenue, expenses, and mill rates. So it gives you a running history of where Garden City is in relationship to other community colleges as well. So I think, you know, this is a good opportunity each year. A good point is to kind of reflect on where it is comparatively we're at, you know, with a lot of the indicators that we use. And being able to put into context where Garden City ranks in case you ever get asked those questions or need to know, you have a reference point to go back to there on this information.
What's the logic behind Dodge at 29 tuition rate and 82 for fees? And us at 69? Are they making it,
I will
the
tell
charge
you,
is the same, but they're making it awful.
I'll tell
One
you-
as opposed to the other.
I'll tell you exactly what the logic is.
They can advertise 29.
They advertise that they have the lowest tuition in the state.
Right.
But what they're also doing is passing along the highest fees in the state to
Right.
students. But using
But
that.
they don't tell them.
No,
But they use that to fund things outside of the general fund.
yes.
I'm typing, say that again.
They use that fee money to fund expenses outside of the general fund, i.e. you
Yeah.
cannot pay for athletic scholarships out of the general fund. You can figure out the rest.
They're using it to build their athletic department up.
Correct.
But then I noticed Coffeyville's a similar deal. 20 or 39 tuition. and Higher fee. I think what we're doing is a lot more honest.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say that there's flawed logic in the model, but I like the model that we're using. And then last page, very last page, page 31. Again, this gives you an understanding of the total acreage, campus property as well as square footage by building, just so you have some context of the footprint of the campus area.
Now we'll be updated, sure.
Would that you sure take up a chunk of square footage?
We do.
No, Beth in particular is.
Oh, Beth is, yeah,
Yeah, Beth.
yeah.
She hadn't caught up.
Really,
She didn't
the,
even hear you.
really the whole Great House family.
What?
Yeah.
We were looking at the facility square footage and I said, you take up a whole lot of space.
Hot damn, yes. And we'll even go for more every chance we get.
But that is what we put together. Happy to entertain any other questions. Or if there are questions that come up afterwards, definitely don't hesitate to let us know there. Be flat, no.
This indoor arena is the deal down the rodeo arena.
Pardon me.
On here, this facilities, the 30,000 square, that's wrong, or indoor arena, that's the,
Horse Palace.
Horse Palace.
Yeah,
yeah,
So as you guys were working on, oh, I'm sorry.
not done.
Okay, as you guys were working on putting this together, were there any big, I don't know, surprises on any of the changes up, down? Or things you didn't see coming when you were putting together all of this to funnel it down to us?
I don't know that there was any aha moments.
No, not, I mean, there are some things that we didn't, that are impactful that are, for instance, we have an instructor who works on a H1, whatever, I never get
H1B1.
H visa, and so this year, this time in renewing that, well, it's always, we have to pay the fair market value. And so that increased significantly this year. So we had to add that to our negotiated agreement so that if, so to justify why he's getting it more money. But that, I mean, and so that does impact the budget. I mean, it's, probably about it was over a $10,000 adjustment. But he teaches in a field that is really, really hard to find talented faculty members.
Sometimes those premiums are required.
Yeah, and so, no, I don't really think so. Which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I was, the health insurance premium took me back a little bit. So since we're not self-insured, we really aren't privy to the claims information until we have the early rate meeting. And so, that's a catch-22 as well, because especially when your claims have been trending high, they're gonna present high. So, the original presentation was about a 35% increase. And fortunately for us, our model prevents us from having to absorb all of that. But at the same time, on your direction last year on insurance, had the opportunity to work with a consultant from Gallagher, who we did on the property casualty side too, but also on the employee benefits. And so they go in and work with Blue Cross and Blue Shield on some different funding strategies. And ultimately, we may look at a self-funding model with, you just have to put, it allows us to keep our reserves versus the insurance company. And you just have to, self-funded models 20 years ago are very different than today. But in that process, it allows you to have more knowledge about what's going on in your plan. When I worked at the city of Brighton in Colorado, we were self-funded, and you meet with the investment people every month and to make sure. So we're considering some opportunities like that there are other providers other than Blue Cross Blue Shield. You certainly can't make a change in a knee-jerk way, because benefits are people's pride and joy, and so we would never do that, but we are doing our due diligence and looking at some other options.
And saving a couple of dollars isn't worth
Right,
the fear it would
Right.
create.
right.
But yeah,
And because that's, I think back in the early 2000s, when health insurance was just all over, and companies would, change like annually, and it messed with people's,
Yeah.
and so, we certainly would never present something like that, but so, that was, we didn't really have any way to know.
yeah, no, I understand.
And not that, it's hard to manage what you don't know.
It's getting so high, Blue Cross Blue Shield's getting so high now, in my own personal life, it got to where I could not afford Blue Cross Blue Shield anymore, and I had to get another company, and I really didn't give anything up.
Right,
I really didn't give anything up.
yeah,
It was just the thought of going, I've been Blue Cross Blue Shield so long, it was the fear of I'm giving something up that I'm not going to know until I try it.
That
Right.
comfort.
And that's the same way I think would be with this
right,
group.
exactly,
They, I don't want to give it up.
yeah.
They don't
and for
know
some-
until they do and
Oh,
find
yeah,
out that
and for
it's a
some
little better.
reason, the climate when I got here was, we have a grandfather plan. And there was, when the committee would meet, it was really important that we continue that. I don't fully understand what all that brings to the table, but I have been really impressed with the two individuals that we're working with, because they're the experts. They understand the actuarial side, and if they don't save us what they think they will, the total cost to us for them doing the work is $12,000. Well, to me, it's worth $12,000 to see what the options are, especially when you're looking at a 35% increase.
Yeah, that's significant.
And the other thing it does is it lets Blue Cross Blue Shield know that remind them that there are other players at the table.
We are not a captive audience, so.
But it doesn't matter to them, they're not going to change.
Well, I mean,
But-
I don't know, and again, I don't even know what the recommendations are gonna be. I do know that Brian, who's one of the consultants out of Wichita, he's mentioned United. I had United when I was in Colorado. And we're pretty close to Colorado, so, I don't, you have to know what providers take here and that type of thing. Again, if we make any kind of change this year, it won't be significant because people aren't expecting that. We haven't done any surveys. We haven't empowered them to, feel comfortable with maybe looking at something different. So I'll be 60 this year. One thing I've learned over my time is that, it's just not worth getting people caught off guard.
Yeah,
It's like, people are slow to change, but it's just a fear factor if it's presented to them and they don't have any knowledge of it, even if it's a good thing. I mean, it's just like us going through Blue Cross using the Grow Well Clinic, that has been a tremendous asset, but there were some people prior to us trying that, making that available last year. I'm gonna say it was kind of a conspiracy theory, and that isn't how I think, but people do, and I was glad when it was presented through Blue Cross, and I can tell you that it's been highly utilized. It's been a great asset for us on pre-employment things. Anyway, various things. And I wasn't unaware that access to healthcare in Garden was so limited. I came to town, I got a doctor, and so that's my world. So, but I guess that is a reality. So I appreciate the question, Shanta, but no, I don't. One thing I will say that I truly appreciate is the support that the community gives the college. That's when you work for a tax supported entity, not every community as a whole is as supportive, but when you're at the table and industries coming to town and you meet with them regularly before they make a decision, I think that's an awesome, we are an asset to the community. And so it's I really appreciate and not everybody sees things the same way, of course, but
Yeah, last, this is just information on the itinerary for the HLC mock visit on Monday. Highlighted board dinner with the two individuals coming in there to help lead the mock visit. It'll be at 6 o'clock over in the down. So that would be this next Monday, and then Tuesday would be the regular board meeting. See a lot of each other here next week.
Where is
Go
it?
ahead.
The endowment room.
Yeah,
What, do we need to bring our binders, our policy govern, I mean, is any part of this mock gonna be asking us questions that we need to be able to do, so that's right there in policy? Or,
so that's what we've asked these two individuals. I mean, they are both peer reviewers. They both go out on site visits. So what we've asked them is to try to mimic
Well, I think we're gonna.
as best as we can there what it is that the board would experience in November. So I would bring policy governance manual. I would bring the handouts and that binder we have in the board meetings, and then I would bring the assurance argument there as well.
Assurance
Pardon?
argument.
Oh,
And budget, yeah, I mean, you can bring this document there then as well. You know, I would say by and large, the questions that you can expect are going to be more about policy, governance, policy development, oversight on the college. They're not gonna sit there and ask you what's the college's budget set at, and they're not gonna get into specifics on that, you know. But it's more high level. How do you know the plans are clear? Do you see what's your involvement in master facilities plan? You know, what's your involvement in the planning process, setting the budget?
Do you want us here all day?
No, I mean, I think 6 o'clock is fine. I just,
So,
Mark had put together this schedule. I was just giving it to you highlighted.
so we're not here for the 8:30.
No. Can be if you want to. You're absolutely welcome anytime.
the more I'm around, the more questions they could ask, the more I could
Right.
fumble it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, just the 6 o'clock. You need to be.
So who does the 8:30 to 9:30 and?
So we pushed it out to all of campus. So all of campus will
I see.
have the option, but then we have very selected groups like college council, cabinet, specific groups. So, you know, with each of them, like on teaching and learning criteria 3 and 4, we'll have our division directors, deans of instruction, you know, and individuals who are more specific on those criteria involved in those meetings, because that'll be what it is when they're here for the site visit in November. But it is open to anybody to be able to sit in and just listen and learn.
And where do these, are they all different areas or?
No, I believe these will be in the lecture hall. I think they're in the academic lecture hall. So it'll be very similar, so like so in November, I mean, this will be a very good snapshot. But in November, the 5 criterion, they have a set time that they open up the lecture hall there, and they invite anybody, community members, campus.
Do we have to advertise that or something?
Have to advertise it, students, you know. They have general sessions there where anybody is invited. And so this will be similar to what we have. Then also after we submit our assurance argument, they start to look at certain things, and then they let us know, you know what, I'd like to know more about the camp grant that you have for migrant students. We'd like an hour session there with the camp staff so we can learn more about. So there's certain things that, based upon what they read and glean and have interest in or want more questions on, then they tell us who it is they want to meet with. Because they'll be here for 2 full days.
And if they leave early, it's good. I'm serious, because they got what they needed to know.
Yeah, no, that's true, that's true.
They went through the first day.
Mhm.
First half day.
Swell. Wow.
They probably won't go.
Yeah,
I'm considering-
I mean, there is
They gotta make sure and show their due diligence.
That's
as
right.
well.
there is a sense of anxiety that hits campus there though, once you have those 2 days. It's been really just leading into it.
Yeah, I'll just say, having been through this several times and that I think having the mock visit is really a proactive approach. I don't know if you've done that before.
Not to this level. We brought in a consultant there that kind of led discussions, questions, but not to this level. Well, appreciate the dialogue and the questions. And like I said, if there's other questions that come up, don't hesitate to let me know. Should I address this?
There you go. Taking up some of my week next week.
You can have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday all to yourself.
You got a wedding coming up before long.
I know.
You getting remarried?
Woo!
Yeah, she got drunk again last night.
Do you have any questions about that?
Skipped church Sunday and I-
Neutral.
Friend of mine said, where did that say? Oh, she
Resolution
got
that
drunk
we
again. last night. I didn't leave her home.
I-
Well, I got a wedding coming up.
It's
It's
odd,
Saturday,
it
yeah,
makes sense.
Friday the Saturday.
We are
A week from
But-
Friday.
That's
still waiting.
Carol
on
was
final
through Clarion.
direction.
I saw that, I
State
saw that.
Book, and it's open.
Guidances with money though as well.
Each of the
That's
public
free.
entities.
So we're
Saturday
having
then.
we're having a meeting on Friday.
Methodist
with
And
the
they're
kids
going
on
to
her
see
Also,
building.
so she's going out like that
the
weekend.
neutral
And then
revenue.
But then the
Sydney,
next weekend,
or-
she's
No, I
going
haven't
to
received
But
final
we can, but if
information
you
from
say
state
you
on
don't need it, you're
Her
locked
oldest
in.
son,
one whether we have to
But if
call
you
it
say, I'm gonna
like
exceed,
vacant,
then you have
and they're going to leave
leeway.
them alone.
federal building, it is federal dollars. So what we do.
It's terrifying.
Change the scope of the project.
18-year-old ain't gonna be, they're gonna be fine.
But yes, we are.
Yeah, we know.
That's the
Middle
middle
of
of
this.
the, but it's related, it's related.
No, so what we have.
The statute that we was talking about was passed in 2020 for 21 was by the state legislature. And they instructed all the county
So anything over
governments
1.5.
What you come back to and what's broken, what carpet's stained. Yeah.
rather than and you are going to
Well, that's good.
exceed it, then you have to declare
It's
it.
gonna be.
They're not gonna have
Tell
the
the
margin
public
for
so
it.
that they can-
They get tired of being over there later in life, they just go.
And so it made all of the governing bodies think
You know,
about what are
Alfred
they gonna
just said
do.
that probably that's the best arrangement.
We are, but
Before
it's,
we would
it's kind of like
change it
everything.
every year.
Yeah.
They come home, they do
It's
their
not
own.
gonna get
They go to school, everything, they got their homework.
that you're gonna
dress
exceed
right,
it,
go
it
eat
gives
tidy.
you,
No, the millions.
They do their homework, they can do stuff.
you do that,
Technology.
and
Faster.
even though
I wouldn't
they're
trade
saying
it for
the
anything.
states,
I'm glad they got a system.
So allow us to be
it's just
able
a,
to do Zoom courses
playing
for
the
dual
game.
credit.
That the
So are you gonna get caught up by the end of the week?
no, got interpreted down.
Never
Our
Never caught up, but James has helped me from being so far behind.
I had the right one year. It's gonna be nice to have that shopping. Goes right after the snow.
Well, just the time it takes out of our day,
Yeah, we've got.
working on it, and so go back and just business.
We're gonna say that we're gonna see, but our actual
Yeah, Burbis,
Oh,
budget,
but again,
Service
Motors has a whole bunch.
Yeah.
yeah.
We've been a couple ago, you know,
It's good. It's fun, but it is-
They're projections, you know.
Yes.
Reporting on it.
a little bit smaller, sorry to
I think
interrupt.
That's okay.
They just get tired of it, or was it going broke?
Board,
I haven't had the chance to talk to him.
Hey, Dave.
board member,
You like her.
I'm adjourning the meeting, so.
Thank you, okay, we are officially adjourned.